Okay, so today we're going to talk about how to make big plans for your business when you really don't know what's going to happen in the future. And so, one of the things that we really want to touch base on is the understanding that you may have a grand idea for where your business can go and how it can be achieved, but at the same time, you do not know what's going to happen in the future. So, for example, with 2020, no one knew about the COVID thing happening. No one was prepared for that. And so a lot of businesses struggled. Others became super successful. Matter of fact, certain industries even became more prosperous because of COVID, and while others unfortunately depleted and went away. Now, this particular uh, video is not going to be about, or this live session is not going to be about discussing, what to prepare for a disaster scenario. Instead, what I really want to focus on is the idea of starting your plans for what could potentially be in several years away, possibly even a decade away. These are things that it's more of an idea, it's ideation, it's coming up with what can be potentials while thinking objectively of what is now and how to make sure that works. So first things first, if you are just starting your business, then this video is going to help you in understanding what could possibly be the next steps and getting ideas moving, and is it okay to think about those ideas ahead of time. Now, it's important that you establish the product or service for which it is you want to begin. I'm going to try to gear these live sessions towards more of the baking side of things, because that's the industry that I'm most familiar with, as opposed to trying to be more and more elaborate on all sorts of industries when I don't know a lot about those industries and the things they can go through. But for the most part, business is business. So the general operation of things is pretty consistent. So whether you're in the automotive industry or some other industry, you can still apply these ideas to those. So always start with the product or service you have in mind. So in regards to baking, when we first started Silver Rose Bakery, we knew that we really wanted to get into the baking industry, but particularly in the aspect of like weddings was a big focus for us. And so when we started, uh, what we wanted to do was consider what are some of the challenges that we're going to be need to figure out. Things like, do we need a certain amount of space? Do we need to get funding for this? Can we work out of the home? So these are very, very minor things that in the long run, we're going to contribute to whether or not we can even get started. The second is focusing on the target market. Again, we said weddings. That means individuals who are currently engaged and are planning their wedding, which means that they have to be in pursuit of establishing the date. They are getting all their vendors. They're actively trying to plan their wedding. We're not interested in engaged couples who are engaged but not committed to the planning process. So those were not our customer. So we also, and when we first started, did not really understand how to go about that. So, like in previous videos and live sessions, I spoke about how we kind of went after everything. What if it was $12 for 12 cake pops plus free delivery? It was something. It got us actually practicing the baking and business. So when it comes to determining what your outcomes you want, you need to be focusing on what is most desirable for your outcomes. So when it came for us for the wedding business, is we wanted to expand the business in a way where we can get more weddings and focus our business almost 100% on weddings, And so that means that we needed to understand, could we do this out of the house? Could we get involved with venues that would be okay with a bakery that's being done out of a home? Could we expand that, which means that could we get more sources of revenue from the weddings, and how do we increase revenue without having to on current clients or through the current products that we're offering? So, for example, like with weddings, well, there's wedding cakes, but there's other desserts that are also involved. So we can easily add on mini cupcakes. That was not a big add-on. It was part of a product that we already provide, which was cake. Cake pops, that was within the same realm. So it was not adding more, but we could easily add it. So we decided that those are the best paths. So you want to determine um, with your concept, do you need a location? If so, do you need a large facility? Do you need something small? Do you need something that you can share, at least to get started? Enough work to get you busy. Are you able to go out and find work? Now, this is very basic and uh, getting started with your business, but it's also important in understanding how to make the bigger plans. Because if you are not centered and focused on the products that you are going to be offering or services you're providing, then how is it that you can make bigger plans? You're going to be making plans where, like what we've seen in the bakery industry is, someone will start a bake shop, but then they'll bring in coffee, and then they'll bring in ice cream, and then they'll bring in uh, sandwiches and things like that because, well, they can bake the bread. So even though they're a dessert baker, those are not thinking big. Those are thinking of survival. So the idea is to think big, but think big based on the product you are offering, not trying to focus on the here and now. Uh, Considering the unknowns, for example, COVID is an unknown. How do you prep for that? How do you know how to prep for that? Changes in the market. So a change in the market could be like in the wedding industry, for example, especially in the baking industry. Baking industry is part of the wedding industry. Uh, the trend to move away from the traditional stack cake to a small cake and a lot of desserts. That was definitely a trend before COVID hit. And so when this happens, it's being open and aware of those things, and how can you incorporate that, and how can you expand on it? So it's being open minded to those possible changes. It's being open and willing to pivot. It's understanding that the model you've created, though good now, may not work in 6 months, a year, 5 years down the road. What kind of things could you do that will enable you to pivot without being stuck too much in one spot? So going back to example of some of those bakeries that are adding on coffee and ice cream, if the market no longer is interested in them, perhaps they're in an area that's starting to change in the market dynamics, then what they might have to consider doing is a different type of business model. Now they've got products that they don't need anymore. So rather than centering their focus on the cakes and desserts they might have been producing, and they also have to worry about what are they going to do with all the coffee? What are they going to do with all the ice cream? They've also have all this produce and stuff for the cafe that they don't need and weren't really interested in the first place. And they simply are not willing to change because those items are still bringing in a little bit of income, and so they're not willing to look outside the box. So it's understanding that if you've created a product, let's say it was a baked good, something new and fun that is really capturing momentum, then how can you expand on it in a way that will allow you to grow efficiently, but grow specifically on that product? So you're thinking about things like, how can you sell the product? What are some other ways to market the product? And also, what kind of things can you take on to allow you to expand? So, is online ordering an option for you? Is going to a farmer's market better for you based on your type of product or service as a baked good? And also, a big thing is being prepared to pivot, especially when there are changes to the regulatory system. You could know me; I'm not a big fan of regulations. As far as I'm considering it, shouldn't be any regulations. You are grown up. You should be able to decide whether or not you want to purchase from me, the baked good vendor. Um, with that said, you have to be prepared to pivot and make some sort of adjustments when regulations change. And for example, with our bakery, as much as we are growing our local establishment and we've gotten clients that have enabled us to ship things locally, we cannot expand on those local gift shipments because the simple fact that in Arizona, it is there is a regulation that restricts us from shipping with outside the state. So we can't ship to California or to Florida or New York. We can only ship within Arizona to other Arizonans. It is the most ridiculous rule ever. If somebody wants to purchase something, they should be able to purchase it regardless of where they're from. But that is something that was established. Um, Embracing the pivot. I keep coming back to pivoting. Pivoting is twofold. So pivoting consists of first doing small tests. So always testing little changes to the product you have and seeing how that is being accepted within the market. So if let's for example say that you were doing cupcakes, but then you also have cake pops. You're going to try out cake pops with within the market you had, and you're seeing that the cake pops are starting to become more trendy. But they you found out that it's only for a particular group. Well, is that going to be worthwhile pivoting over to or building upon? And if it is, great. If not, then pull yourself back, continue focusing on your cupcakes. Other ways of pivoting is that you're finding that the product or service you have is simply not good for the market. This market is not wanting what you're offering. You need to simply pivot. That's a pretty drastic one. Typically, that's going to happen if you're trying to start a brand new product in which the market has not seen before and maybe simply wasn't ready for at the time. Another thing is to consider if the market dynamic, going back to that bakery that wants to be a cafe and 10,000 other things, is the market is no longer seeing an interest in what it is that you're providing. With that regard, it's time to consider either a pivot that it might be a little more drastic. This could mean moving. This can mean changing the product or service if that's something that you're willing to do because you want to stay in the area, or honestly, just discontinuing the whole idea and perhaps starting something completely different. Now, there is the idea of overreaching. Now, going back to, like I said about that um, bake shop that wants to do anything and everything underneath the sun, it's better to take one product and see the different types of markets to which you can apply it to. It's better to have a couple of different products that are very similar in nature and offer them in different arenas. Wedding, celebrations, for example, with the baked goods area, versus trying to add on something that is technically a new industry, a different industry in itself. For example, the sandwiches and baked goods. Just because you can bake bread and desserts doesn't mean you should. It may be better and more beneficial to you as a business and your growth to stay within one of those focuses. So if you were doing desserts and you're proficient at desserts and you're making money at desserts, stay in desserts. Find ways to find other market avenues. Uh, pulling back on your focus, your initial focus, it could be actually be a good thing, because the simple fact you can find ways to increase your revenue from the product offerings you already have. Something simple might be that you find is you're pricing everything at the same price, whereas you could offer certain types of products, perhaps it's just like flavors, at different price points, and that from the market is okay to do. Or the reverse, where you have a lot of different pricing and you decide to make a streamlined single price to make it more convenient for your customers. And with that, you find you're getting more revenue. Um, Other aspects to do is find other types of products that are within the same realm of what you are already offering, or find minor upgrades to what you're already offering. If you're offering cake pops, then perhaps adding a color adds a little bit of cost. Adding some sort of minor decoration can add additional costs. And you can offer those as an upgrade, or as an add-on to what you're already offering. Now, one big thing to consider when going after those big, hairy, audacious goals is the generality. I keep going back to this idea that you want to stay focused on what it is you're already um, proficient at, and the reason for it is because you can only become more proficient and be able to offer more items that are of a similar nature, and that increases your ability to become more efficient at that. And you meet with efficiency, you're able to find ways to grow. And by that, I mean, first is you discover what your limitations are by focusing on one, possibly two product areas. Then you can start defining the opportunities that are possible with that particular product. Stacked wedding cakes, that can be something where we can transition those to something other than just weddings. Similar types of cakes, possibly with some different colors added to them, could actually be other cell types of celebration cakes. That means that we can target those areas as well. Um, and then defining your biggest opportunity, something that you can start like right now. Uh, when you're starting that, perhaps you need to consider first whether or not that type of idea is going to work for um, your particular business. So, like with the wedding cakes. Uh, hey, Young, how you doing? Nice to see you on. Appreciate that. One of the biggest opportunities you can find is other areas that actually want your particular product. So, if you're finding that perhaps like wedding cakes is really good, then asking yourself really what is the limitation of just wedding cakes by itself? Can I offer that in a different avenue? If it's a different type of cake, perhaps it is you're wanting to offer cakes that are of a certain type of quality, which means you're still staying within the same genre. You're still focusing on wedding cakes, but now you're offering an option for a higher quality that doesn't affect your overall end product, but offers you more opportunities to increase your pricing, which allows you to become to improve upon your business. Now, it's it's important when you're doing this to establish some goals, some 3-month goals, 6-month, 12-month goals, things that focus on revenue, on customers, on partners, returning customers, and a new market segments. And then once you reach those 3-month goals, that 6-month goal, that 12-month goal, reflecting on how you did versus prior times. And one way to do that is to establish a set amount of revenue that you want to hit. These are targets. The types of customers you want to hit. Are you going to, or have you achieved a total number of new customers by that time? New partners. New partners could be something where, if you're like in my business, I want to be able to meet new DJs, other individuals that are also interested in the wedding industry, who may want to also refer my business to their customers, and likewise me me refer them to my customers. Those type of opportunities allow for more growth within my business, and if I can continue to do that, that builds my reputation and also enables me to see where I can actually place my business. So for like the bakery, for our bakery, when we did this, we got introduced to more and more venues. That's a huge, important option for our business, or a partner for our business, are venues. Because in that instance, we have an opportunity to have almost guaranteed wedding orders over time, as opposed to having to do Facebook ads and other things, other organic types of marketing efforts that may or may not pan out. And then once you've established those and you find that you are growing, then you can see what your limitations are for the total amount you can bring in for your business. For like the bakery, as you know, I've been mentioning in the last few videos, we've already maxed out our capacity for the kitchen we're in. You know, we're still in our home-based bakery, but there's literally no more room in this house to place another rack. There's no more room to place another refrigerator. We are capped out. We've also discovered we're capped out as far as the amount of revenue we can possibly generate and actually still get some sleep at night. So we've already had in place plans to start getting a facility. And how that facility is going to look is far different from when we originally wanted to create a bakery. When we first got going with the bakery, for example, we looked at some different leasing options for facilities, and for the most part, it was the pretty standard looking bakery. You know, you walk in and there's a bunch of different baked goods, and hopefully you'll buy one and we'll make a little bit of money, and hopefully you return later. And that wasn't the right way to go. That wasn't looking at what it is that we want to produce. Instead, I was looking how we just get into the bakery. Now we've discovered a way to create a bakery that can actually be replicated in several different areas throughout Arizona. And matter of fact, in a way that keeps us focused on weddings and celebrations and doesn't tie us down to baking a whole lot of baked goods that can be thrown out. And with that, we can start considering, well, if we get this one facility going, how can we set it up so that it's easy to replicate it several more times in several different areas without incurring more costs that we don't need and creating products that we don't want to do. So when we were starting to initially think about this years ago, we thought about the idea of having several different bakeries, but they weren't the same ones that we are thinking about now. And so we would have not have looked at it unless we first stop the overreaching and start focusing on something very, very targeted, wedding cakes. And when we focused on wedding cakes, we started to see what opportunities were possible through meeting other people, through setting goals and targets for which we wanted to hit, and finding a way to keep ourselves extremely busy to achieve those goals. What we found was that the market did demand the product that we were offering, and there is plenty of opportunity within the market, and so we were able to continue with our offerings, and matter of fact, introduce minor new offerings that allowed us to get even more revenue at a lower cost with lower effort. And we would not have thought about those, not even realized those are options when we first started the business, because when we first started, we didn't know what was out there or what to do. So when first starting, start with the most simplistic product with the most targeted market you can, and know that it's okay to start small while still thinking of doing something really, really big. But it's much better to set targeted goals over a span of time and achieve those goals, as opposed to trying to get something grand started when you don't really know what to expect. So if I were to give you several ways to really go after how to make the big plans, I would say first, make sure that the product or service that you're providing, for example, if you're in a bakery, is a single product, a single service, something that you're already proficient in or you can become proficient in and are personally interested in doing. Establish your target market, and that can be a very, very niche market, and that is totally fine. Start going after that market. Start offering that product. Start making the product, and start setting those goals. Check in on those goals to see how you're doing. Where do you need to pivot? How do those goals align to the long-term, bigger plans that you have in mind? Consider whether or not those bigger plans you had in mind are still relevant, and what it would look like if you were to go after those. That does not mean go after them. So a couple of years ago, even though we were starting to become very, very proficient at making wedding cakes, we were not interested in having our own commercial facility. We were doing just fine as a cottage baker, which means working out of our home facility. It was starting to get cramped, but we still had the capacity and still had the willingness to continue on going down that path. Checking in later to where once you get to say like 12 months, where were you from your previous 12 months? Are you growing? Are you becoming more proficient at what you're offering? Can you offer something that is comparable? That keeps you in the same product realm, but offers either a better experience. It is going to be an offer for a different target market, but still allows you to produce basically the same product, just with a small tweak. And then how can you market to those? And do you need to get a facility? Do you need to change something within the operations? And if so, how does that look towards the future, towards the big, hairy, audacious goal of whether this is 20 locations throughout the nation or it's 5 or 6 new types of products. Do these small changes help to guide you towards a more proficient and more opportunistic goal that you perhaps didn't really realize, or perhaps it's the same goal, just with new angles, new potential outcomes. And then obviously with, again, keeping aligned to the focus you already have. Don't want to become the bakery that is offering desserts, then offering ice cream, offering coffee, offering sandwiches, and then offering all sorts of random things, candles and all sorts of other stuff, just to get every possible penny in regards to stuff that has nothing to do with desserts in the first place. So keep it focused. And then you might discover that perhaps there is a massive market for what it is you're offering, and the potentials for growing a very large business are there on just a single product. So I'll take it away from the bakery, and let's focus real quickly on the big buzz type stuff, like the iPhone, for example. I remember in school was taught this one, which was iPhone 6 was not what Steve Jobs had in mind. What Steve Jobs had in mind was iPhone, the first one, the very first version. You can only ever consider the first version of what you're creating, and only then can you build upon it to something even more grand. So keep that in mind when you're thinking about your bigger goals. Think about what those goals will be, what the big outcomes are you want, and then pull that back and start with something very, very small and simple. I know that was pretty general, very open, but I wanted to make sure that it seemed easy to understand. And coming from the bakery, let me just give you a little history here with where we're at now. So today we actually had a sit-down conversation with our designers for the first facility. And looking at that design of what they showed us based on what we were wanting to achieve, it is so different than when me and Priscilla first went out to look at potential places to have a bakery. There was almost nothing the same. The only thing I guess you could say was the same. Well, there's the oven, the kitchen, the refrigeration, the sinks and all that jazz was there, but those were about it. There wasn't anything more to it. There's such a different pivot and such a new concept that we're creating that we don't know where that can go. So once we're thinking and you're talking about this, like once we create this, where does it go from there? What can it become? And we have a lot of ideas of what it can be, but we knew the best way to start this was to start with just the one, and we'll work it from there. So what a great opportunity it was to have been working so hard on focusing on weddings and celebrations and just baking for those, that we discovered that we can create something even more awesome than what we had originally even thought. So it almost seems like we've built the iPhone for our bakery, and now we're on to the 6th generation. And comparing the two was nothing close to the same. And I will leave you with that for this live stream. If you guys haven't already, definitely like the video. I really appreciate you watching. And definitely subscribe. We're going to try to do these on Mondays around 9:30, 10 o'clock. And if you have any thoughts about things I should talk about that are coming from not from a huge successful uh, business person's perspective, but from somebody who's on the path to much bigger successes to come from the ones we've already have. I really like to for you to let me know what it is you want to hear, what kind of questions you have, because I'll love to bring those up in the future topics. Until then, have a good evening or a good day whenever you do watch this. And this was Michael Sweet from the Michael Sweet Journal. Take care, guys.